Hey there, welcome to Broadcast to Post. I'm Jeff Sengpiel, CTO at Keycode Media. This is the show where we interview leaders and experts in the AV, broadcast, and post-production spaces. We're giving you the inside tips to grow your media workflows and business today.
What up, everyone? My name is Stephen Mcgee. I'm a filmmaker, everything underneath that, from producer, director, to shooter, editor. What's up, Brian? What up, Del? And thank you for having me here. I've been in Detroit for 18 years. We're going to go through that a little bit. But I think my journey really started kind of how I started here was winning $140,000 worth of gear about 5 years ago at NAB. And that moment of preparing for that competition, it was mind-blowing, right? It's a lot of gear. And right before that, I was shooting on a 5D, that kind of hustle, right? The day in, day out with just a camera and a lens, but a goal to tell stories from the inside of wherever you can get to in humanity. And so this is a picture that my friend David Guttenfelder shot. And I think, I kind of heard a little bit about your story. So I want this to be kind of informal, but also I'll go through things. So if anybody has questions through it at all, we got an hour or 45 minutes. 45 minutes? However long we like. So half of my life is photographing and documenting Detroit, a city that I moved to in 2005 during a time when when there was a general stigma of the city that was very misunderstood on the outside, but led the dominant narrative. And so moving from California, I just felt like the more people were like, why are you moving to Detroit? The more I wanted to get into it. The other half is going around the world like this and filming and photographing for nonprofit groups, corporations, and clients, and that kind of stuff. When I approach B-roll, it's a huge part of my life. The A-roll of the audio is important, but the B-roll really stems from a photography background. And in that photography background, I feel like I want to kind of dive into that. Is this helping so far? Getting into documentary storytelling, it's really a huge thing. It really has to do a lot with who you are as a person, I think, and how you approach stories and how you approach the person in front of you. From that shot over win, I want to show you one more piece that kind of shows a little bit of the background. And I think this kind of helps you see how I move with the camera. But I think the thing to notice is each one of those shots is made from this much space, right? You get into the scene and besides the helicopter shots, it's a gimbal and a camera and a lens and the environment in front of you, right? It's not 45-person crews, though I respect that, right? I respect that hustle, I respect that grind. It's important for a lot of diverse clientele and agency, and I'm going through that right now. As I shoot Pure Michigan's next film on Detroit. But for the most part, it's just me. And it's this internal desire to get to whatever humanity's in front of me, right? You're in general, I look out this window and I was like, wow, I've never seen this view of the city. I'm like, but that's because I'm always thinking of a topic I care about, right? I'm like, can I shoot this? Can I film this in a way later? And then what's on the horizon? Which lenses do I need to get those buildings all the way over there someday? And so, to break that down, I'm standing kind of too much in front of that thing, but to break it down into making a film is where I'm going to go next. So it always, to me, starts with relationships. Relationships all the time. And so for one example, I met this guy, David Guttenfelder, when I was teaching video and photos in Hanoi in northern Vietnam in about 2006. We became friends. He was the first photographer into North Korea with Dennis Rodman. I called him one time when I was on a layover in Japan, and he's like, I'm on a donkey in South Pakistan. And I was like, how do you have cell service? Small things that I don't know about, but you ask questions because I don't know too much. 17 years of just being his friend when he's overseas, messaging him, led to an opportunity to work with National Geographic. Those types of little tiny things that are just allowing. And so he's like, follow me on this, or come with me, I can't pay you, but let's shoot something. And that kind of spec work to me was worth, just hanging out with him, let alone like making a film to work for a company that I cared about. Is this going in the right direction? Is this good? Yeah, we like it. We've seen a lot of films. I could show you this. It's like a 2-minute teaser. It didn't get picked up. It was too artistic. They didn't, like National Geographic didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't have a pipeline, to put it into it. But, I've got 3 kids under 10. Like I can't just go around shooting things that don't go anywhere. But my wife, fortunately, believes me. She's in France right now competing. She's the first woman to do a backflip in competition for BMX. She's a real champ, and we're not 18 anymore. We're 41. And so like she's pushing it every day. So I'm watching our 3 kids and doing this kind of stuff. So these types of stories, like it matters to me every single day. I got to get the shot. I can't come home with nothing. I have to care about the people in front of me. And again, the photojournalism approach is really, there's zero pre-production in photojournalism, like for the most part, and in photography a lot of the time too, and in video journalism too. Sometimes you just have that line, and like I worked for the New York Times for a couple times, and you would just get a line like, show up to this location, come back with a front cover photograph. And some people's minds would just like blow up because they're like, wait, what am I supposed to shoot? And that's a good part of the industry. Another part of the industry is this kind of like make things up as you go and follow the story. That's like a huge concept to a lot of people that doesn't work in their brains. And I think it can. I think it really can. Because the story you care about is the one that matters to the world too. I've just seen systems in place that don't allow the creatives to like push back a little bit and be like, I need to get into this more, right? I need to get there, because if it's not, then it's just this like kind of washed down story of what it could be. You think about it, right? It's like, okay, you have camera, you have the first interview, right? This guy's like, it's prejudice to think about an engine. That conversation started around a campfire. Like, it wasn't like, well, tell me what you think about electric vehicles. I like grabbed the camera and I used the camera like next to his face like this. It was like, this needs to be recorded because I don't want to hear it again. I want this to be the time I hear it. And then the second guy is like, okay, I'm doing this student program. Well, that's my friend Andy. And I knew that was happening because I understand my community. My community is like awesome. Detroit's incredible. The stories, the people, every part of it. So I'm like, if I have an opportunity to lift a friend up to National Geographic status, then I'm going to do that because he's a good story. The kids are going to benefit and all that kind of stuff. It ran huge in the magazine, and that's amazing, right? It's insane. And then you start building these pieces, and these conversations start happening naturally. That guy who was like, dinosaur goo. I'm like, you can't teach that, right? That's like such a good comment about gasoline. So you start building those assets, and the cameras of course matter. Like my camera for the shot over is in the back of a truck, and we're kind of just tooling around. This is what the setup looks like inside. You got a monitor, you have this on my lap, and like, that's the guy that was talking about the engines, and that's the photographer for National Geographic in the back. And we're kind of doing this like little move around, and you just kind of start moving cameras. So again, but most of my shots that you see, like everything, I don't know why this is a big deal, but like, it doesn't take much, right? Like you get to an environment, and if I was gonna shoot you as a crowd here, I'm already in position to have a leading line and a leading line. Like this is where I stand. If I stood here, this wouldn't be my photograph. But like photographically, I'm looking at you guys from my frame. But for me, the way I would shoot you is just dead on. I have all of my lines, everything is perfect symmetry. Because great photos make great clips. If you can make a good photograph, like geometrically, which we'll go into. Oh, here's the gear. So this was gear for this. Freefly, Komodo, Zeiss, and this is kind of how I cruise now. Fujinon, Komodo, and then I'm also using the H2S, XH2S, and the H2, X2, oh gosh, which are just awesome cameras. And I'm actually using them more than my Komodo because the sensors are incredible. Like we can get into that later, but you can see like you could travel around the entire world with this, right? And work for the biggest clients. Like this is just like me being like, this is behind the scenes. And this was for like a leading bank in the world, and they're wanting these stories. like I think I can get into my backstory a little bit, but this is us going up the Zion, river. That's us, the crew of two, and like this, the slow motion functions and that kind of stuff. But for me, it's always full send on B-roll. B-roll to me is always what I lay down. Everybody knows what B-roll is? Anybody know what it is? Cool. B-roll is the video that makes your stories worth watching. And, this is kind of goofy, but it was the only way to get the leverage and the stability that I needed for that shot in Poland. Gear list, I'll get into my framing again, but gear list, gimbal is 55% of my shots are on gimbal. Drones, about 15%. I got the new Mavic 3. Tripods, 10% at this point, although I love a great tripod film. Handhelds, 10%, FPVs, 3%, sliders, like 5%. So for me, the B-roll is always where to point the camera to. This clearly doesn't show that I know where to point the camera to, actually. It's quite the opposite message. But, in Sunrise, it was supposed to be for the apps. And I feel blessed to have grown up in the time where I had to shoot film stock. I had to shoot mini DV tape. I had to get those hours in where like each shot mattered because you were paying for the post-production. And so this was before the Sun app. So, shooting in 2015 for Dan Gilbert downtown, a thing called Anthem of Us, or actually 2016, I was looking for whatever. I didn't know my own process. I didn't trust my own intuition of what camera shots would work, even though I was 12 years into filmmaking, actually probably about 16 years, but really 12 years into getting paid. Now with this, it's like you get from B-roll of like trying to point everything to like, just very specific, I need one shot and I'm going to use, sometimes the craziest gear to get that shot. And even if it's just shoes that cost $30,000. So my roots are always in photojournalism. I was raised just, kind of in California and Las Vegas. And my mom, who turned 75 next week, wanted to be a photographer, but women during that time, she had to fight for darkroom space. Like she didn't have the opportunities to even do as much as she had dreams of. And I felt that when she was giving me that camera for the first time, even though I was only photographing, train tracks that led nowhere or a rose. I was like 18. I didn't really know what I wanted to photograph, but I instantly followed my brother around the world, going to Cambodia, visiting him at, where he was teaching English, going over to Italy, going over to Africa. And it turned into about 40 countries, that kind of like drive to see the world. And every time I would leave, no matter where I was living, you'd come in with fresh eyes again. I don't know, you guys have traveled? Like, that's what it feels like, right? You go over there, you're like, wow, a house on stilts. For the first time, I've never seen that. Then you come back, you're like, our houses aren't on stilts. But now I see it differently. And so photojournalism to me is always about capturing that peak moment. Nothing that you've seen so far is staged, besides sometimes me with the camera. But so in Ukraine, after covering some work I was doing with human trafficking or anti-human trafficking campaigns, I saw this just moment of this these two people, and I knew this person was coming up here, and so I moved myself to the camera and I photographed that. I don't shoot, it's just one shot. And so that's how I approach my B-roll, which is why I feel, my stories resonate sometimes. Photojournalism often follows subjects to reveal truths in unscripted life. Again, this woman named Juan from Vietnam, she had side effects of Agent Orange, and I was invited to follow her around the nation trying to raise awareness for that during a time I had no money and they weren't paying me, but they were paying my daily food. And when you're on that hunger game, food matters and the story mattered. So this was her, she wanted to take a selfie over here and kind of like showing which part of the shot, in photography really matters. Her taking a selfie with San Francisco in the background could have been the shot, but her in her daily life trying to get over this banister rail, which I had clear access to step over, to me was the big moment. And I showed her this and she's like, thank you for showing how I move around. To some people, it might be feeling uncomfortable, and following her around. Finding the moments in photography are kind of also the exact same way I edit my video. So just these moments, on Capitol Hill, getting a prosthetic leg in San Francisco. So this guy who's making prosthetic legs and also prosthetic animals, which was just a massively crazy scene. And then a portrait in San Francisco. and then just like a subtle quiet moment. Just keep doing that through the day and you got yourself a 3-minute film, right? Find those moments. When I shoot, am I going too fast? It's good, helpful, all right. 3:25. All right, so when I shoot the B-roll, like you've seen in those first 3 films, I always look through the edit. And in that edit, I pull the clips that I love into kind of like a buffet. You know, I'm like, these are all my selects. And then I put it into the story before I even put in the audio. I want the video to tell the story first. And then I want the audio to almost like just be exactly what you need to hear, not a word more. And each frame absolutely matters. So I know the strength of the frames, the strengths of the clips. I put them together, I see if it flows, and I kind of start moving that. Like, you know, so picture lock is always first. I place quotes also kind of in those things. I'm like, here's a quote that generally is about electric vehicles. Here's a quote that's generally about electric vehicles again. Which one is stronger? Let's put it here, put it here, put it here. I hope in my shoots that my pictures are always telling the best story. And then the quotes are going to be gripping you into kind of caring about why. Scene-based inspiration, unplanned events. To me, coming in as a photojournalist again, the camera, you know, if the people are moving, sometimes what makes a good image is just like from here to like here. Here to like here. It's like just moving the pole out of the background, moving, you know, something over there. I do the B-roll, it's the same thing. If you think you're going to take a picture here and it's perfect, and then you take a picture over here and it's perfect, the space in between that shot is my B-roll shot. So I start here on a perfectly framed image. Does this make sense? And then I move it over here. I don't know if I'm focusing too much on this, but that B-roll kind of keep on stacking those clips and keeping it photographic is another way of saying that is like keeping the geometry in the frame like active. You know, I feel like that kind of starts setting apart the work that I appreciate on Instagram, on, you know, in movies. You know, people plan entire shot decks out just so they can keep up their own vibe. But each of you, or if you're shooters, or if you work with shooters, like everybody has something they're attracted to that makes them lift the camera. You know, and if you can encourage those people to keep pushing their limit of what they find beautiful or how they want to frame. Because again, you know, I never shoot anything looking down at a 45-degree angle. I'm either looking straight down or straight level. Everything, I mean, in the gimbal though, you can like do this type of move, right? Like where you kind of have like a 3-axis tilt. So all of that theory into movement and things that are just happening naturally. You think you're totally out of control, but you soon to start to think of things of like, well, if this person's moving over there, I'm going to move with them, you know, and it's kind of like the Matrix where you're like, it just needs to move perfectly, and then you get the shot. You know, yesterday I was filming paddleboarders, 3 women. Often clients want scripted things, and I don't do scripted. So this major client in Michigan is asking me to do a film, and they don't really have too much creative input. They're just like, do what you do. So I've got to figure out how to do what I do in like the largest platform possible in the state, and, or in my mind, and do it authentically to me and to them. And so I had 3 paddleboarders like going towards Coriander on the east side, which is an incredible, incredible place if you guys are here tomorrow or the next day. It's right on the water. It's got canals. It's really beautiful. The food and the drinks are fantastic. And it was sunset. So it was like 7 p.m. They're walking. And as they're walking, I've kind of already understood like exactly where, I can't show you this stuff, but you'll see it in June. But you know, as they're walking, I'm like, I know this is going to be a 3 shot. It's going to take about 3 seconds to get through those 3 shots in a 90-second spot. So I'm approaching that whole scene and I'm in and out of the scene in 10 minutes. I'm not there for 3 hours. I'm not there for like 20 minutes. I'm there 10 minutes, not wasted their time, and I'm out. And it's because I know that, you know, because I've been able to put productions together in a way that I'm also editing them, which I'm now trusting other editors, which was a big deal for me. I know though, as producer and director role, I'm like, this is just a 3 shot, like boom, and you're done. So all around scene-based inspiration. This is kind of what it looks like sometimes. It's like, I'm looking for the shot. This is 2017 me, so I've kind of a little bit better, but not too much. So this guy's like painting this wall, and I'm just kind of trying to work the scene moving the camera around. That's kind of that scene-based inspiration move where he's putting that bucket down. And during this time, I'm shooting 120 frames per second, so it's slow motion. So I know that I only need to go, and there's a whole shot, and I don't need a gimbal for that because I know that this scene's going to be like, put the cans down, put this, and this spray. So, great. This was, that's that. Oh yeah, then it goes on. Here's another environment. This is a top-down drone shot of community cleanup, which we've all maybe filmed or not filmed. But this community day, they're going to move this mattress. But I mean, look at this scene. You have this like beautiful examples of peak Detroit auto manufacturing and an awesome man who lives in this house. And so these community volunteers are helping. So I want to honor the man. I want to honor them. And so, moving this was an environment that I just wanted to be respectful of. So I don't ask them to do anything, but I'm recording the entire time and I'll move the camera in for like that first shot. You can imagine like going in on them all with their hands on it. And then I'll come all the way back here to get a wide as they move out. So it's still recording. I come here and I'm like, I want to see the mattress moving away from these awesome cars in slow motion. I did a lot of slow motion because I never really focused my lenses. I'm always like on the brink of total failure. And I have no problem saying that because somehow it continues to be success. And so environment directly impacts camera movement and shot sequences in real time. Questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, this is kind of the shots this is the shots ungraded from the Fujinon cameras, which is insane. Like, it's a tiny camera that can move in like incredible ways in 120 frames per second at 4K. So like, it's kind of become my #1 film. And so this was for a group that's purchased land back for First Nations people. And so we kind of shot some BTS. We shot some of the people that got the land back. But you can kind of see like this process of just, here's a shot. It's always kind of moving forward, sideways, up, down, graded, not graded, and how we move. So questions, keep on going. So a team of stacking clips. I was a single operator for a long time. In 2005, I worked for the Detroit Free Press. I had just worked around the world, was almost killed in a crazy experience in Uganda, came back to California, and I was like, dude, what's life about? Like really questioning kind of like purpose. And it wasn't anything, I was just in the wrong place. Like, I'm not even judging anybody over there. It just kind of was crazy. And I came back to California, and while all my friends were filming and photographing surfing, I was like living with homeless people trying to tell their story. And the next day, Detroit called, Detroit Free Press, and they're like, do you want to move out to Detroit? And I was like, absolutely. Like, and like I said, like everybody was like, don't do that. That's like not what you want to do as a filmmaker. And I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to get to know a city that nobody really knows from the people that I knew. And so that started in 2005. We won 2 national Emmys back to back, which was in bonkers. Like Dan Rathers was giving me an award. And it kind of was like, okay, we're doing something right. And at that time, YouTube was just starting. And the newspaper decided to kind of take a YouTube approach, which they just needed to sell it to ad dollars. And I felt more of a calling to the city. And it was a city that I wanted to get to know and get to know the insiders and get to know myself. I don't know, there's a draw here in this city that's beyond words. Like it has to be translated through visuals. A photographer in the back behind white and I were just talking the other day. We were in totally different circles in 2010. And I'm like, I want to know your circles from like those years, because those stories from the inside Detroit perspective haven't hit the national narrative like the stories of what wasn't here. Like everything about Detroit from the outsider's perspective was like, it was up, and in 67 it went down, and now all of a sudden it's back up. And I'm like, that narrative is stuff that I've heard from a lot of different people from the background, but isn't what I've seen or experienced or heard from the insiders, people who have lived here their whole lives. And so I say all that because, for a couple of years, I think I have it around here somewhere. No. I was going to say, for a couple of years, I was working for journalism outlets, both trying to understand how to tell the story here, trying to understand who else was telling stories here, and also getting requests from the outside of like, show us the worst of the worst, like from the top media outlets for years. I'm not disrespecting them. It was just kind of the vibe that they were going for. And, you know, those years of journalism and in the streets where I was making like $9 grand a year and eating bread out of a dumpster got me to understand who I was as a filmmaker in the best way. It was like a hustle that was like, it was something I recognized at the time and something that I was, I'm thankful for years later. From that moment, I got married and then my wife became my producer. And that was like the first time going from a one-man crew to two people crew. And from that, then we started growing our business and getting bigger and bigger jobs. And now 3 is kind of my go-to. I know that was kind of an interesting arc to get to this image, but the arc, it's really only been about 4 to 5 years of having 2 to 3 people crew. How many crews are on yours? 2 or 3? 4? 1? Yeah, all the above. So Bailey is a drone pilot, gimbal operator, all this kind of stuff. Brian was the producer that kind of took us around the world and director. We have fun on a lot of our shoots. We don't need to get into that. But our interview setups look like this when we're anywhere in the world. We have some type of high-end recording audio device, boom pole that fits into a small bag, microphone. Here we're shooting on Reds in a studio environment, kind of like where we had more access to gear. So we had, this boom pole, light panels. That's Kevin Johnson out of Atlanta. He really runs a very good production with lots of people and crushes it all the time like that. This was me being like single operator with all the stuff. It gets really kind of dirty sometimes where you have like the single pole and all the things hanging off of that. And I don't recommend that, but that's kind of where I led my life sometimes. Questions, comments, concerns? Doing good? All right. Framing interviews. For our magazine, I was offered an opportunity to tell a story of the city. So they gave me 18 pages to talk about kind of my experience here. And I immediately turned the lens on the people that I met along the way. And Bryce Detroit is one of them. And he has an art sign that's called Hood Closed to Gentrifiers, which is a beautiful message just about entering people's communities that you think need something, but they have a whole ecosystem of things going in already. And immediately some people might be pushed back from this, but it's actually an invitation to get to know people. And so having those types of narratives in a magazine that goes across the state, to me, was a really important thing. And so this was not an interview, but this is how I frame now in interview standards. It's not the bright and tight of 2006, 2007, where you would, frame like, this, right? Like lower or right. Like it's really like I would have him talk in this loose format of framing in terms of you're just not on his face. But like if I could ask him in questions and you would just press play, like I want the interviews to feel like a destination themselves. And to me, that goes to the extremes. This is 2 gentlemen. Matt's dad ran the first Lincoln, or Matt's grandpa ran the first Lincoln car, and now he's turning it into a park for art. So, in me looking at how I do things, I'm approaching interviews like I need to stick these guys up here, and that's where I'm going to do the audio interviews. Just because there's just ways. This year for 313 Day, Shinola asked me how to celebrate 313 Day, March 13th, our area code. They did a profile on this archive that I have for online, and then we selected this gentleman, Ro Spit, who designed some Jordan shoes, amongst a million other things. And Shinola was like, we want, a fast-paced film. And I'm like, actually, let's just slow it down. Let's just have a portrait and have it be 1.5 minutes on Instagram. Like that's completely against like everything I've watched, for the most part. And so over that interview way of just like kind of talking, I didn't have a camera on him. I just had a microphone in front of him, like kind of like this. we just started talking. I had no agenda. Like, I'm like, where's this going to go? And that's kind of how it goes. Like, sometimes it's like, oh, you Frisbee golf too? Cool. Like, where do you like to Frisbee golf? And then it'll be like, and then, you're like, oh yeah. And that's the gold. And so we got to that gold. I want to have like this option, for both of us to find a revelation in a conversation that means something to both of us. And so in that, this is how Roe, it was going to only be 90 seconds, but we ended up having 2 cutaways just for people from the outside to see Detroit. But here we go.
When I explain Detroit, people it's like it's this thing that you have to wear on your back. And I'm representing where I'm from. The state doesn't move without Detroit. Detroit is the heart. When the heart is healthy, it makes the state move, but it also makes, it does something for the country. Everybody, is coming here, man, and it's pumping blood literally through the whole country. Something was planted years ago, a couple years ago, starting to sprout. It's just being watered. When you got people like Big Sean, Royce, Eminem, they may not even know who Slum Village is, or might not even know who Dilla is. When you got people like Jessica Caramel, like, who represents Detroit more than her? Trick, maybe? You know what I'm saying? Like it's these people that wear it. Whole families have kind of been through the flux to get to this point. So it's an honor for me to even be in a position to represent this place, and I don't take it lightly. I don't take it. I take it everything behind me. I'm bringing it all with me everywhere I go.
We shot it in 5 minutes, right? Like, I'm like, well, let's find a place on Woodward. I didn't know Roe before this moment, and 48,000 plays. Tons of comments that were like, "This is how I feel." I mean, 48,000 plays for me is a lot on Instagram. And it was Shinola who has a big following, but it's super easy for people just to stripe up. But that kind of thing, like just getting that instant quote of like depth, you can see beautiful reels and it like doesn't have any substance, respectfully, right? But like that substance is in everybody, Yeah, so Roe, each person I feel like has a moment inside where if I'm like, hey, I'm like, you mind just standing there, like, and looking proud, or just looking at the camera. Like, I don't need a smiley. I don't need like all this kind of stuff. And so Roe is on the side of life where, he's in the spotlight. He's been behind the camera. He's in a movie. So he did that perfectly, right? When people aren't, that's kind of where I'm like, how do I get the most out of that? And I mean, I'll try and get to an image sometime of a worker. I'm in charge of documenting Ford's train station project. And one of the workers there was like, "Can you shoot my daughter's graduation photos?" It's like, I don't really do that ever. And I've never done that. I've shot like 3 weddings. One of them was Pamela Anderson wedding with Kid Rock. One of them was like my brother, if somebody asked me, well, I'm not a wedding photographer. I'm definitely not that high school photographer. But it was like right after the marches downtown, and I was, tear gassed 3 times by the police. I'd seen a beautiful side of the city from people marching inside, protecting downtown from people from the outside. And so it was just like, I was in an amazing place where I'm like just getting a better depth of where I'm living. And so it actually seemed like the perfect time to talk to this high school senior. And she had like built at the top of her hat to say like BLM, something else in her high school. And so like, just having her take it off and hold it and like look up like that, it became this beautiful portrait. And then the train station was purple. Like it turned into something that I would never have expected. And I had to get there, right? I had to get to like, okay, are you wanting to look up or down or right or left? But like for the most part, 120 frames per second really helps, that really slow shutter. But we're in the middle of Woodward. So I'm just like, maybe I'll go back a little bit and maybe I'll tilt up, and like, boom, it's done, and that kind of stuff helps a lot. But, I think everybody can get there in no matter their background. You just gotta, it's the access into their lives, which they permit you into as a filmmaker. Sometimes if you show up being like, you're lucky I'm here, like I've seen people do that. I noticed there's like a wall. So, in Ukraine, I was shooting at this orphanage, and I was like, I'm gonna play soccer with them for 2 hours before I even film, even though we only have 3 hours to film. And they were afterwards. Everyone's like, they shut out every other film crew because they just didn't care. They didn't care about the subjects, right? And so, in the interview environment, there's a nice little trick here that happens to be something many people know about, but this illustrates it very well. Now you see him, now you don't. And it's just a plate where you film. Obviously, this is a little bit subject to like documentary rules. Like, are you going to do this in a documentary? But it's a great way on a windy day to kind of get that microphone close and just split the scene up in half. So we don't have too much time left. On a separate shoot, when I was filming those the First Nations people, like it happened to be in this childhood forest that next to like just 2 miles away from a forest that I grew up in as a kid from San Francisco. And so like, I just asked my friend from the FPV pilot to fly through this scene. And I don't even know what this is gonna be for. Maybe it's for my documentary film that, this Resurgo film, which is it's not official, but like, that's what I'm naming the film. But like, kind of me retracing my steps in life, because I think that kind of like wherever you came from matters. I was on WDT the other day, and there was like, take your kid to work day. And there was all these like 8-year-olds. And they're like, what do you want to say to these 8-year-olds? And I'm like, I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I'm like, follow your dreams. I'm like, it's like, but that's kind of our audience right now, right? It's like, what do you say to people? Like, what do they need to hear? And I was like, wherever you guys are in life right now matters. Like, what you care about, the world should know, and follow whatever that means to you. And so like, when Hour Magazine came to me to like, do a Detroit guide, and I was able to point my lenses to like my friend Bryce Detroit and a woman named Marsha Music whose father lost his business when the 375 plastered over Black Bottom and Paradise Valley. These stories that are like just so important, not only to the Detroit narrative, but to the national narrative. Like, I never knew that was gonna happen like 10 years ago when I'm eating bread with my cat. Actually, that was like 15 years ago. But, like when I was just married and we're having kids in the city and we're just like living life here. And I didn't come up with documenting Detroit, becoming a Detroiter, because like, that's not my words. So that's kind of an interesting thing to me. But, with the Resurgo film, it's just this process that I'm trying to understand, this 18 years of content, this idea that there's many other lenses besides the ones we carry. And, I have 2 million photographs, thousands of hours of footage, and I'm constantly trying to figure out the narrative arcs. And each film I do about the city, like this one I'm about to show, is my own search to try and figure out purpose. I think that's like, purpose is too big of a statement. It's more like just like that, it's like that unspoken thing inside of you of why you pick up a camera, why I do. So, half of the shots you're about to see are found moments. Half of them are artistic, like we set this up, like a helicopter day. Helicopter days are very expensive. I had never had that before. It was more money than I made 3 years total, was in one day of shooting a helicopter. But because of that shot over when I became friends with people that were really good at what they did, and we brought in a Hollywood filmmaker and a Hollywood aerial DP and all these things. And my life went like this. And like just meeting people who are over there, could take whatever you need to do to the next level in a way that you never thought it could. And so like 3 weeks before this moment was never even an option. So this was shot in about 2 weeks and edited in the same time when Amazon was trying to find its second world headquarters. Like this, every image of that was created wasn't created with that film in mind. It was like a daily look. It was a daily revelation of looking at the people in front of me and being like, yes, you could be in the film, but more so like, how can I lift up this voice? How can I lift up this voice? And, we're kind of in that middle right now. Like I'm just starting my next film with her. And I have no idea what it's going to look like in some respects. I'm in a better place now to have a little bit of pre-production so that I do know a little bit more. But, it's due June 6th. And like, I'm in the middle of this like massive hustle. Yeah. I don't even have music. I don't know what the music is. We know what the poem is. I now kind of can be like, I want these shots. Because with Jessica, it's like a see and say, right? It's like sometimes you need to see exactly what she's talking about. And sometimes pretty pictures and people can just help you understand the vibe that you're trying to go for. So we could go in a lot of different ways after that, but I kind of want to open up to questions or closing thoughts. Some of the 2005 work really was 100% tripod. Finding that frame was very good to do. It just kind of like honing that skill. For the Detroit Free Press, it was a 30-part series that we did, 2 to 3 minutes each in 2005 and 6. So it was kind of a little bit different for what most other people were doing online at the time. And we just kind of had to find the story as a documentarian does. But it's very much like, here's a shot, here's a shot, here's a shot. Like the tripod way, right? Like it's like just boom, boom, boom. And I've carried that into the gimbal world, but sometimes I didn't hold the shot for too long. I would cut, when you shouldn't cut, But for the most part, it's really just tuning and being more, not arrogant, but self-confident in your approach to like filmmaking. Because in 2007, I went across all of Vietnam for the largest nonprofit group there. And approaching every scene, even if it was 14 hours away, I would stress the entire time there. Like 14 hours of stress being like, what am I gonna shoot? What if I don't find anything? But like, we all see something that we see, and you will only see what you see. Like, it's like kind of like backwards thinking, but I've gotten to the confidence level of like, I understand the scene's gonna be good. I'm gonna be prepared for that as much as I can be prepared for. And if I see something, I'm gonna shoot it. And that kind of thing has just decreased the stress in my life. And then the 3 kids in my life also have increased the stress in my life. So, in the most beautiful way possible. Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate your time, and feel free to hit me up anytime.
Thanks for watching Broadcast to Post. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive future episodes. Follow Keycode Media on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram to receive news on additional AV, broadcast, and post-production technology content. See you next time, folks.